I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you unwind after a long, busy day. Before you drift off to sleep, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. I remember the night the laughter stopped being funny. It was supposed to be a small-town Halloween festival. The kind of place where plastic skeletons, dangled from lampposts, and fake cobwebs glimmered under orange streetlights. Kids ran through the crowds, masks half falling off, while parents warmed their hands around paper cups of cider. Everything felt safe, until the lights began to flicker. I was there to take photos for the local paper, just another assignment. Capture the spirit of Halloween, my editor had said, so I did. I captured something else too. It was behind the carousel, an old ride that had been there for decades. Squealing and creaking with every turn, I was adjusting my lens when I saw him. A clown, not one of the cheerful ones giving out balloons. This one stood perfectly still. His makeup cracked like porcelain, eyes hidden in shadow. He was tall, too tall, and his grin stretched too wide. At first, I thought he was part of the show, until I realized no one else could see him. Children ran past him. Adults looked through him like he wasn't there at all. When I looked through my camera lens again, he was closer, just a few feet away now, staring directly into the glass. I lowered the camera, and he was gone. That night, as I drove home through the empty roads of Miles County, I saw him again, standing at the side of the highway, beneath a flickering light. His shadow reached across the asphalt like black ink spilling toward me. I blinked. He was gone. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I'd been working too long, staring at too many Halloween masks. But when I developed the photos the next morning, my stomach dropped. In every shot I took that night, every single one, the clown was there, standing in the background, sometimes behind a crowd, sometimes inches from the camera, always watching. That's when the dreams started. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with the sound of balloons squeaking. Once, I swore I heard laughter coming from under my bed. When I went to the police, they told me to take a break from work. One officer even joked, "What's next? You gonna tell me Jigsaw's after you too?" But this wasn't a movie. This was real. I stopped sleeping. I started locking every door twice, pulling the curtains shut before sunset. But one night, when I glanced out the window, I saw the reflection of a red balloon drifting by the glass. My breath caught, and that's when I heard it. A faint, rhythmic knock from the closet. 3 knocks. Then silence. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a lamp, and crept toward the door. The air smelled like rust and wet paint. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. When I pulled it open, a balloon floated out. Red, shiny, fresh, and behind it, nothing. Just the empty darkness. The next morning, I packed everything I owned and left town. But no matter how far I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was following me. Sometimes I'd see him in reflections, a passing window, a rearview mirror, the surface of a coffee cup, always that same cracked grin. People online called him Art the Clown. They said he wasn't human, that he didn't speak, that he didn't die. I didn't believe them until the day I found the photograph on my doorstep, a new one, printed and clean. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed, and in the corner of the photo, just visible in the shadows, was him. I burned that photo, packed another bag, and disappeared again. But I know what's coming. The laughter is getting louder, and tonight, for the first time in weeks, I can smell grease. Somewhere out there, he's smiling, waiting for the curtain to rise again. Because the show never really ends, it just waits for its next audience. And this time, it's me. I don't know exactly when I realized I was alone. Maybe it was when the lights of the park began to die. One by one, each bulb popping like a dying heartbeat, leaving trails of weak smoke curling up into the dark. The silence that followed was heavier than air, like the world itself had stopped breathing. Then I heard it, a laugh, a faint, scratchy giggle that sounded like it came from a broken radio buried somewhere behind me. "You stayed for the show," a voice whispered right against my ear, close enough for me to feel the cold breath. I spun around too fast, stumbling over old popcorn and puddles of something sticky that looked like blood. "Who's there?" I shouted, but my voice cracked like glass. The Ferris wheel, motionless in the distance, loomed like a giant watching me. Then I saw him, the clown, not the same one as before. His face was cracked like dry paint, makeup peeling off in flakes, and his eyes were two glass marbles filled with something dark that moved when he blinked. He held something in his hand, a clown mask identical to his own, dripping red. "Wanna trade?" he asked, voice stretching and bending like tape warped by fire. I stepped back, my legs trembling. I just want to leave," I stammered. He tilted his head, smiling as if that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Leave," he echoed, the word twisting through the air. But the fun's only just begun. The air stank of metal and sugar gone rotten. He took a step forward, dragging the mask along the ground, leaving a glistening trail behind. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked, and before I could respond, he pointed straight at me. "Because I think yours ends here." His words hit like a hammer. Lights flickered back to life, one after another, revealing horrors I hadn't noticed before. Broken dolls hanging from wires, mannequins with human eyes sewn into them, deflated balloons smeared with dark stains. "This isn't real," I whispered. "It can't be real." He laughed, a horrible, wheezing sound that echoed from everywhere at once. "Real," he bellowed. "Everything here is real, especially the fear." I ran. I didn't even think. I just ran. The ground beneath me kept changing. Concrete turned to mud, then to wooden planks, then to something that pulsed like living flesh. Behind me, his footsteps, slow, deliberate, always close. Sometimes he hummed. Sometimes I heard the screech of metal dragging against metal. "You run well," he mocked. But nobody leaves before the final act. When I reached the main gate, I saw it was open, or at least, it used to be. The chains hung loose, glowing faintly, as if still burning from heat. I pushed with all my strength, but the gate didn't move. The metal scorched my hands. "That won't work," his voice whispered from behind. I froze. He was there again, close enough for me to see my reflection in his eyes. "You came in," he said softly, "and now you're part of the show." He traced his bloody finger down my cheek. "Smile," he whispered. "The audience loves despair." That's when I saw the stage, a wooden platform set in the center of the park, lit by flickering spotlights. In the stands sat dozens of figures, motionless, silent, all wearing clown masks. Some had hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Some leaned lifelessly to the side, but they were all watching me. "The audience is here," he said, clapping his hands. A warped waltz began to play from a hidden speaker, slow and broken, as if from an ancient gramophone. Time for the finale. He pulled a rusted saw from his coat and spun it in the air, grinning. "You know how to dance, don't you? Please," I begged, tears burning my face. "I didn't do anything." He leaned close, his grin stretching too wide, too human to be human. "Exactly," he whispered. "That's why no one will miss you." Then the lights went out. The sound of the saw screamed through the dark, followed by a chorus of muffled gasps and laughter. Pain exploded across my shoulder, hot, sharp, merciless. I fell, crawling, but the floor gave way beneath me. Suddenly, I was falling into blackness. When I opened my eyes, I was somewhere else, a small concrete room, a single lamp dangling overhead, and an old TV in front of me. On the screen, I saw myself running through the park, screaming. The footage kept skipping, freezing, and each time a new message appeared in white letters. "Smile, you're on the show." The saw's hum returned, this time from behind the door. "It's not over," the clown's voice said, playful and cruel. "The crowd wants an encore." I ran to the wall, pounding, screaming for help. The lamp flickered faster, faster, until it burst, plunging me into darkness. Something cold touched my shoulder, metal wet, humming softly. "Applause," the voice whispered. Then everything went black. When I woke again, I was sitting in a chair, tied down. The TV flickered on. The clown's face filled the screen. "Welcome to the next act," he said, smiling wide enough to split his cheeks. "Tonight, you're the star." When I finally woke up, the air around me felt different, colder, heavier, almost like breathing through glass. I was still in the same chair, or maybe not. It was hard to tell because the room had changed again. The walls were covered in peeling floral wallpaper that smelled of mildew and forgotten years, and in front of me sat a small wooden table with a single object placed neatly in the center. A doll, not an ordinary one. This thing looked alive. Its porcelain skin was cracked like old bone, and the painted smile seemed to tremble at the corners, as if holding back laughter. A child's voice echoed softly from somewhere above, like a lullaby carried by wind. Percy wants to draw. Percy wants to play. My pulse pounded in my ears. I whispered, "Who's Percy?" But deep down, I already knew the answer. The doll's glass eyes rolled upward until the whites disappeared, and a thin black liquid began to drip from its mouth. I jerked back, the ropes cutting into my wrists. "Don't look at me," I hissed, though I couldn't tear my eyes away. Then, the impossible, its hand moved. A slow, stiff motion, the wooden fingers scraping against the table until they clutched a small pencil. I blinked. The pencil dragged itself across a torn sheet of paper, moving in sharp, frantic lines. I strained to see what it was drawing, and my stomach turned when I realized it was me, tied to the chair, eyes wide, mouth open. "Stop that," I demanded, voice trembling. The doll paused. Then its head tilted to the side with a dry crack. "Percy doesn't stop," it whispered. The lights flickered, and with each blink of darkness, it got closer, first sitting on the table, then standing on the edge, and finally, inches from my knees. "I don't want to play," I said, trying to sound firm. But the words came out like a plea. "You're already playing," it replied in a child's sing-song tone. The pencil scraped again, harder this time, and the sound was like nails digging through wood. The drawing now showed my chest, split open, with the word inside scrawled beneath it. My breath caught. I struggled against the ropes, feeling them dig deeper, burning my skin. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted. The doll smiled wider, its jaw unhinging with a sound like splintering timber. "Because you're hollow," it said, "and Percy fills empty things." Then it dropped the pencil, and the paper caught fire without a spark. The flames licked up the edges of the drawing, illuminating the doll's face in red. I braced myself for pain, but none came. The fire vanished, leaving only black ash and silence. For a moment, I thought it was over. I thought maybe the nightmare had finally ended. But then I felt something movement, a crawling sensation inside my chest, like tiny fingers pressing against my ribs from the inside. "No," I gasped, twisting in panic. Get it out," I screamed, my voice echoing into the empty room. The doll was gone. When I looked down, the ropes had vanished too. My wrists were free, but they burned with red welts. The room seemed to expand around me, the wallpaper stretching, the floorboards warping as if breathing. I stumbled forward, searching for a door, a window, anything. That's when I saw the mirrors, dozens of them, covering the far wall, each one reflecting not my image, but a version of me sitting back in the chair, eyes hollow, mouth stitched shut. I backed away, shaking my head. No, that's not me. But they moved, even when I didn't. "Percy fills empty things," the reflection whispered, in my own voice. I turned to run, but the floor collapsed beneath me, plunging me into blackness again. When I landed, the impact knocked the air from my lungs. I was in a hallway now, long, endless, dimly lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. On each side, doors lined the walls, and from behind each one came faint noises, sobbing, scratching, whispering. I walked, trembling, until one door stood out, old, wooden, painted red. My name was carved into it. "Don't," said a voice behind me. I spun around and nearly screamed. A man was standing there, pale, gaunt, eyes sunken deep into his skull. His clothes looked like hospital scrubs, stained with something dark. "You can't open that," he warned. "Why not?" I asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "Because if you do, it's over." Before I could respond, the door began to creak open on its own, a thin light spilling out. "Percy wants to draw," came the child's voice again, louder now, more insistent. The man backed away. "You shouldn't have stayed," he said, disappearing into the shadows. I took a breath and stepped through the door. Inside was a small room, a nursery. The walls were covered with drawings, hundreds of them, all made with the same frantic lines. Every picture showed me sleeping, running, screaming, and in each one, the doll stood somewhere nearby, watching. On a tiny bed in the center of the room lay Percy. It looked smaller now, almost fragile. I approached slowly. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. The doll's eyes flicked open, and for the first time, its voice sounded human. "I want you to finish the picture." My throat tightened. "What picture?" It lifted its hand, pointing to the far wall. There, drawn in red, was a half-finished image. Me, standing beside an open door, with darkness spilling out. I reached for the pencil lying beside the bed. It was warm, almost pulsing, like a heartbeat. "If I finish it," I said quietly, "will you let me go?" The doll nodded. "Maybe," it said, smiling faintly, "but be careful. Once you draw the dark, it starts drawing back." I hesitated, the pencil trembling between my fingers. Then I began to draw. The lines came easily, as if guided by something unseen. When I reached the figure of the door, my hand moved on its own, sketching the darkness inside, shaping it, giving it eyes. I tried to stop, but my arm wouldn't obey. The air grew thick, humming with energy. "Percy," I cried, "make it stop." But the doll only laughed, a sound like shattering glass. The wall began to ripple, the drawing moving, stretching outward. Hands, black and formless, reached through, grabbing at me. I screamed as they pulled, the room dissolving around me. The last thing I saw before everything went black again was Percy, sitting on the bed, waving goodbye. When I woke, I was in my apartment. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains. Everything looked normal to normal. I stood, shaking, and walked to the mirror. My reflection smiled back. I didn't, and then I saw it. Faint but clear, a small signature carved into the corner of my mirror. "Percy." I should have known better than to get on that bus. After Percy, after the mirrors and the whispers, I promised myself I'd never ignore my instincts again. But the night was cold, and I was tired. And when I saw the yellow headlights approaching through the fog, part of me just wanted to believe in something ordinary again. It pulled up without sound, doors sliding open with a hiss like an exhale. The driver didn't look at me. He just nodded once, mechanical, as I climbed aboard. The smell hit first, metallic and sweet, like rust and perfume. There were only a few passengers. A man in a tuxedo staring at his shoes. A woman in a torn prom dress, humming quietly to herself, and an old man clutching a cane made of bone. I hesitated in the aisle, glancing back out the open door. But the fog outside had thickened. I couldn't even see the street anymore. "Last stop," the driver said flatly. His voice didn't match his mouth. It echoed from everywhere, as though the bus itself were speaking. I forced a nervous laugh. "That's funny," I said. "I didn't tell you where I was going." No one answered. The doors closed with a heavy thud, sealing me in. The bus lurched forward, and the city outside vanished. In its place stretched a dark highway, empty and endless, under a bruised purple sky. The lights inside flickered, each flash freezing the passengers in unnatural poses, mouths open, eyes wide, like mannequins mid-scream. I tried to sit, but the seat felt wet. When I touched it, my fingers came away sticky and dark. I turned around to the woman behind me. "Hey, are you?" I stopped. Her eyes were milky white, her mouth sewn shut with black thread. Yet she smiled. "You shouldn't have gotten on," she whispered without opening her lips. My heart slammed in my chest. "What is this?" I demanded, standing, my voice shaking. The man in the tuxedo turned his head slowly toward me, his neck creaking. "It's the party," he said in a childlike tone. "We're all celebrating." Then the lights dimmed to red, and music began to play faint at first, like something from a broken radio. A slow, distorted waltz. The passengers rose from there, seats in jerky movements, and began to sway to the rhythm. "Stop it," I cried. But they didn't. The driver's reflection in the mirror grinned, though. His real face remained still. The road outside began to curve, sharper and sharper, until the bus tilted dangerously. I stumbled, grabbing a pole for balance. The humming grew louder, a deep vibration crawling under my skin. "Driver," I yelled, "you're going too fast." But when I reached the front, the driver's seat was empty. The wheel turned itself. "You're not supposed to be here," came a voice behind me, soft, familiar. I turned, and my blood froze. It was Alina, the woman from the mirror, from Percy's drawing. Her face was pale as paper, her eyes glowing faintly blue. "You finished the picture," she said gently. "Now you're part of it." I backed away. "No, you're not real. I watched you burn." She smiled sadly. "None of this is real, darling. That's the problem," the bus screeched, metal grinding against metal as it spun into another sharp turn. Outside, the highway dissolved into a swirling void of stars and screaming faces. "Where are we going?" I shouted. Alina tilted her head. "Back." The lights flickered again, and suddenly everyone looked older, decades older. The man in the tuxedo skin sagged in folds. The woman's hair turned gray, and the old man collapsed into dust. I felt it too, a weight pressing down on me. My heartbeat slowing, my hands trembling with age. I stumbled toward the door, slamming against it, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out," I screamed, pounding my fists. The driver's voice filled the air again, echoing from the ceiling vents. No exits, only arrivals. The music shifted now fast, frantic, like a heartbeat speeding toward collapse. The passengers began to decay where they stood, flesh peeling away, bones glowing faintly red beneath. Their movements didn't stop. They danced even as their bodies fell apart. "Join us," the woman croaked through torn lips, reaching for me. "It's your turn." Her fingers brushed my cheek, freezing cold, and I screamed. Jerking away, the bus hit something, the impact throwing me to the floor. I looked up and saw the windshield shatter outward. Beyond it, only darkness, infinite and hungry. For a moment, there was silence. Then I heard a child laughing, soft at first, then louder, closer. I turned toward the back of the bus, and there he was, Percy, sitting on one of the last seats, legs swinging, holding that same pencil. "You didn't finish," he said. "I told you it draws back." I crawled backward on my hands, shaking my head. "No, you're gone. I saw you burn. I saw you saw what you wanted," he interrupted. "But I never left you. You brought me with you. Remember?" He lifted the pencil and drew a line in the air. The line glowed red, then split open into a crack that tore through the bus from ceiling to floor. Wind howled through it, pulling everything toward the void. The passengers screamed as they were sucked out, their bodies stretching into shadows. I clung to a pole, my hands bleeding. "Please," I begged. "Why are you doing this?" Percy smiled sweetly. "Because you're still empty." I felt my grip slipping. The world tilted, the sound of tearing metal filling my ears. Then, suddenly, hands grabbed me. Strong, human hands. I looked up to see the tuxedo man, his eyes clear now. "Hold on," he shouted. Together we braced as the wind roared. "You can't fight it," I cried. "Yes, we can," he said, "but you have to let go." "That makes no sense," I screamed back. He smiled faintly. "Neither does this." And then he pushed me not into the void, but through a door that hadn't been there before, a door made of light. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing on the side of a road. The bus was gone. The night was quiet, save for the hum of insects and the distant sound of an engine fading away. My hands were bleeding, but I was alive. I turned in a slow circle, nothing but trees and mist. Then, from somewhere behind me, came a faint whisper. "You missed your stop." I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. Only an old, rusted bus stop sign, half buried in dirt. I walked closer, brushing the grime away. The letters carved into the metal read, "Last passenger." My reflection in the sign's surface smiled back at me, but my mouth didn't move. "We'll drive again," it whispered. The fog began to thicken, curling around my feet like smoke. I stepped back, but the ground felt soft, too soft. When I looked down, I realized it wasn't soil anymore. It was carpet, my living room carpet. I was home. My heart pounded as I turned toward the couch. The TV was on, static flickering. A faint reflection shimmered on the screen, the inside of a bus, red lights flashing. And sitting in the driver's seat was me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One new message, next ride inbound. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the screen, listening to the static shift into that same twisted waltz from the bus. I told myself not to look outside, not to check, but I did. And through the window, parked across the street, I saw the bus again, engine idling, lights pulsing, waiting. When I moved into my new apartment, I thought the worst was behind me. The bus, the doll, the endless nightmare, all buried in the fog of memory. I just wanted rest, peace, sleep without whispers clawing at my thoughts. The landlord seemed oddly relieved when I signed the papers, as if unloading something heavy. The place was fully furnished, and at the center of the bedroom stood an enormous bed, old, carved from dark oak, with a velvet-trade headboard that shimmered faintly under the light. Antique, the landlord said, handing me the key. Came with the place. People say it's lucky. I remember laughing, trying to believe in something so harmless. That night, I lay down on it, and for the first time in months, I felt calm. The mattress was soft, almost too soft, like it molded perfectly around my body. My eyes grew heavy, and I fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in years. But the dream wasn't mine. I saw flashes, a woman's face twisted in terror, hands clawing at the sheets, her mouth open in a silent scream. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, the scent of iron filling the room. When I turned on the light, I saw red stains blooming through the white sheets like flowers. I checked myself. No cuts, no wounds. But the mattress, it pulsed, just once, as if something beneath it was breathing. I tried to get rid of it the next morning, called movers, friends, anyone who'd help. But every time I left the room, the bed seemed to find its way back to the center, perfectly aligned, perfectly still. Even the movers refused to touch it after stepping inside. Feels wrong, one of them muttered before leaving. I thought I was losing my mind. The second night, I slept on the couch, but woke up in the bed anyway, my body pinned in place. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The velvet headboard rippled like skin, and from its surface, shapes began to form faces, hundreds of them, trapped just beneath the fabric, their mouths opening and closing in silent agony. Rest, they whispered, voices overlapping in a hypnotic hum. Rest forever. I thrashed against the invisible weight holding me, feeling something wrap around my legs, thick and damp, pulling me deeper into the mattress. My fingers sank into the sheets, which now felt warm, wet, alive. I managed to tear myself free, rolling onto the floor, gasping for air. When I looked back, the bed looked normal again, perfectly made. The velvet gleamed in the dim light, untouched. But on the floor beside me was a single tooth, human. I stopped sleeping after that. Days blurred into each other, my reflection growing hollow, my eyes sunken. I started hearing the hum even while awake, low, steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. I tried burning the bed, but the flames died the moment they touched the wood. I tried salt, holy water, prayers, nothing worked. One night, desperate, I tore the mattress open with a knife. What spilled out wasn't foam or springs, it was hair. Human hair, long and tangled, matted with dried blood. Beneath it, a face pale, eyeless, smiling. Finally, it whispered. Before I could move, the bed split open like a mouth, wooden jaws snapping around me. I screamed as I felt myself being pulled in, the velvet wrapping around my arms and chest like muscle. Sleep, it crooned, and dream of us. I clawed, fought, begged, but the harder I struggled, the deeper I sank. My last glimpse before everything went black was my reflection in the mirror, not terrified, not dying, but smiling, peaceful. When I woke again, the room was empty. No bed, no blood, just sunlight pouring through the window. But when I looked down, my hands were covered in splinters, and under my nails, something pulsed faintly, red velvet, breathing. I never believed in haunted houses, not really. But after moving into that old Victorian manor, I started to understand why people whisper about them. The locals called it the Hollow House, built over 2 centuries ago by a man named Alaric Dorn, a reclusive inventor who, according to legend, vanished without a trace. The place was massive, full of mirrors, spiraling staircases, and doors that opened to nowhere. At first, I loved it, the solitude, the history, the creak of the floors that made the silence feel alive, but it didn't take long before the strangeness began. Every night, exactly at 3:33 a.m., the lights would flicker 3 times. The air would shift, cold and heavy, and I'd hear footsteps in the corridor above me, measured and deliberate. I tried to convince myself it was the house settling, but sometimes, in the reflection of a mirror or a dark window, I'd catch glimpses of a man in outdated clothes, tall, pale, with eyes that glowed faintly blue. The first time he spoke, his voice came from the walls. "You're early." I froze. He didn't sound angry, just confused, as if he'd been waiting for me, but I had arrived before I should have. From that night on, the house no longer felt empty. It watched me. I began hearing faint music drifting through the halls, a harpsichord, elegant but out of tune, playing the same melody over and over. I followed it one night, half awake, and found a room I'd never seen before. Dust lay thick on the floor, but there, in the center, was a table set for 2. 2 candles burned, fresh, alive, their flames unmoving. At the head of the table sat the man I'd seen in the mirrors, Alaric Dorn, or what was left of him. His skin shimmered faintly, translucent, as if made of smoke. "You've kept my house clean," he said, smiling faintly. Good, my voice wouldn't come out. I just stood there, trembling, feeling my heart slam against my ribs. "Do you know what time it is?" he asked softly. When I shook my head, he leaned forward. "It's always 3:33 here." Then the candles went out, and I was plunged into darkness so complete it felt like drowning. When I came to, I was in my bed, my hands covered in soot. On the wall above my nightstand, written in ash, were the words, "Thank you for staying." After that, the house began to change. Rooms appeared where there hadn't been doors before. Clocks ticked backward. My reflection stopped copying me. Once, when I looked into the bathroom mirror, I saw Alaric's reflection instead, standing behind me, smiling that same polite, ghostly smile. "We're almost ready," he whispered. By the final night, I could no longer tell what was real. My phone, my watch, every screen showed 3:33. The mirrors covered every wall now, even in places where I was sure they hadn't been before. They didn't reflect light. They reflected him. I saw his hands reach through, pressing against the glass, stretching the surface like water. "It's been 200 years, he said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. "And finally, I'm home." The house began to shake, the walls groaning like something waking from a deep sleep. I ran for the front door, but the hallway stretched endlessly, doors multiplying, corridors looping back to the same room over and over. I could hear his footsteps behind me, slow and steady. "Don't run," he said. "You're mine now, part of the house." Like me, I reached the foyer at last, and threw the door open, only to find the same room again. My room. Same bed, same mirror. But this time, Alaric stood beside it, smiling wider than before. "You've done well," he whispered, touching my shoulder. "Now rest." My body froze. The light dimmed. I tried to scream, but my voice stayed trapped in my throat. When I woke again, I wasn't lying on the bed. I was inside the mirror, watching someone else unpack boxes in my room. Another tenant, another guest, another me. The clock on the wall struck 3:33. I didn't mean to enter it. The park seemed ordinary that evening, quiet, fog curling around the trees, the smell of wet earth heavy in the air. I had been walking alone, thinking about everything I had seen, everything I had survived. But then I felt it, a tremor beneath my feet, a soft hum, almost like the whispering of something calling me. My eyes fell on a depression in the grass, a hole, narrow at first, then widening as if the earth itself had breathed and opened a mouth. I hesitated, my instincts screaming to turn back, but something pulled me forward. The darkness inside was complete, ink black and infinite. swallowing the faint glow of my flashlight. I could hear voices, soft at first, whispering my name, then crying out in fear, pain, laughter. I tried to step back, but my shoes had sunk into soft soil, rooted in place. "This is a mistake," I muttered. But my voice came out too small, almost swallowed by the hum rising from below. And then, without warning, the edges of the hole expanded, almost like it was alive, and I fell. I didn't scream, there was no air, only the feeling of being consumed. As I tumbled, I glimpsed figures at the periphery, distorted shapes, faces pressed against the walls of darkness, mouths moving but no sound escaping. I landed in a space that defied physics, a cavern stretching impossibly high and deep. The walls were slick, reflecting a faint red light from nowhere, and the air was thick with the scent of iron and old decay. I tried to stand, but the ground beneath me seemed to pulse, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Every instinct screamed to flee, but where would I go? There was only the abyss, waiting, hungry, patient. As I explored the cavern, the whispers grew louder, forming words, then sentences. They spoke of past horrors, of the people I had seen in the bus, the bed, the mirrors, all somehow here, in this place. Their faces pressed closer, screaming silently. I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder, not one, but dozens, layered, multiplying. I spun around, trying to identify the source, but there was nothing. Then I saw him, or what I thought was him. A figure emerging from the blackness, skeletal yet alive, a tangle of shadow and bone. It smiled, and I recognized the eyes. Alaric Dorn, the bus driver, the old owner, even the reflection in the bed, all merged into one impossibly ancient entity. "You've been collecting them," it whispered, voice echoing from the walls. "All the lost, the broken, the curious, they belong here, and so do you." I tried to speak, to argue, but my voice failed. My body began to lift, slowly, as if pulled by unseen threads. The cavern shifted, ceilings stretching impossibly high, floors dropping away into infinity. Shadows of those I had encountered before flickered across the walls. Percy drawing red lines, the killer bed's faces, Elena's ghostly form from the bus, all watching, all waiting. And then the floor beneath me opened again, deeper than before, swallowing the echoes of the world I knew. I realized with a sick clarity, there was no escape. This place had been waiting for me my whole life. And the stories, the horrors, the nightmares, they were all breadcrumbs leading here. The entity, 1,000 faces woven into one, reached out with a hand that was both shadow and flesh. "Sleep," it said, "and awaken in the story." My mind screamed, but the pull was irresistible. I awoke on the surface, gasping, in the middle of the park. The hole was gone, nothing but grass, dew glittering under the moon. My chest heaved, my hands trembled. I looked around. The air was still, the night quiet, and yet I knew it had followed me. Everywhere I went, shadows flickered where they shouldn't. Reflections twisted in mirrors. Beds and chairs whispered in the corners of rooms. The stories were not finished. I had become the collector, the keeper of their horrors. I understood at last. The bus, the doll, the bed, the house, the abyss, all threads woven by the same hand. And I was now part of the tapestry. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of the lost, heard the whispers of the doomed, felt the pull of the void waiting for me to step back in. And so I speak now, not just to warn, but to record, to leave a trace, a faint map for those who may wander too close to the stories I have endured. For if you ever find a bus in the fog, a bed that moves on its own, a mirror reflecting something alive, or a hole in the ground that wasn't there before, do not enter, run faster than your lungs will allow, and pray that you are not already part of the story, waiting to be collected in the abyss below, where all our nightmares gather, patient, eternal, and hungry.